Hi, we're Jason and Jessica Bozarth.
We've been married for 13 years. We have two beautiful children. We've been going to Radiant Life for 8 years.
We got married in July 2004 and knew right off the bat that we wanted to start a family. But after several months of trying without any positive testing, we decided we'd go see my OBGYN, and at that point they put us on a fertility drug called Clomid. And after 6 months of taking that medication, we finally got the news we've been waiting for. We were pregnant.
We were very blessed to have Reagan in our lives. She's been a great joy, and the pregnancy was perfect and smooth, and it was just a true blessing. After the joys of having Reagan, me and Jessica talked back and forth about whether we should try to get pregnant again real quick. I wanted to try right after Reagan was born, but Jessica wanted to wait a year and then try again. And so I agreed, and so we waited a year, and it ended up being 10 long years.
After we'd tried to get pregnant for a few months after we had Reagan, and she was a year old, and things weren't working, we went back to the gynecologist, and they had told us at that point that since we had to take fertility drugs to get pregnant with Reagan, that they were going to recommend at that point that we just jump straight to seeing a fertility doctor. At that point, we got set up to see a doctor at North Kansas City Hospital, and he immediately off the bat wanted to start with the in vitro process. But I did not feel that that's where we wanted to go. I felt like there was probably more options. So at that point, we got a second opinion from a doctor out in Lee Summit, and he had me have a surgery in September of 2009. It was a laparoscopy where they went in just to see if they could find reasons that were causing us to have the infertility issues. Whenever I had the surgery, he determined that I had stage 4 endometriosis that was going all the way down to the sigmoid colon, and had told me that once he'd got that all cleared out, that we should be pregnant by the end of the year. So when that didn't happen, there was a lot of hurt.
Then he decided to do insemination, and so we did, I believe, about 6 to 7 rounds of insemination each time. We'd have to go to Lee Summit, and of course those cost some money. And unfortunately, not a single one of those took. So at that point, we kind of reassessed our lives and kind of took a break from that, and had to start talking to a lady that went to church with us, and talked about possibly adopting. So we checked into 2 different adoption agencies, and at that time, I believe Reagan was about 5 to 6 years old. And so I told Jessica I did not want to adopt anybody that was older than Reagan. She was our first child. We felt that, she needed to be the oldest in the house. And so we just felt that it was best to try to adopt somebody younger. Well, during that whole process, we basically got turned down, telling us we are wasting our time on wanting to adopt anybody younger than Reagan, because that's what everybody wants.
So after that was something that we decided wasn't going to work for our family at the time, we wavered back and forth with should we do the in vitro process. Our insurance did cover that in some aspects, but there was still going to be
significant
about a $10,000 financial hit that we were going to have to take if we decided to go that route. And we finally decided that we would take a loan out to be able to do that, because we wanted to make sure that we gave every try that we possibly could to see if this would work. So in 2013, we started that process, and They were able to have 6 embryos that they were going to use for this process. They placed 2 embryos our first round, and neither of those took. And then finally in October of 2013, we went in for our second round of in vitro, where they placed 3 embryos in. And in November of 2013, we finally got the news that we'd hoped for many years leading up to this point. And we'd got a call that finally we had a positive pregnancy. And
2 days later, we got the worst news of our life. And it was probably, well, I shouldn't say probably, it was the darkest days of our life. It was one of the hardest things I've ever been through.
I was sitting at work and got the call on my phone from the fertility doctor and thought that I was going to be getting a call saying that my numbers had gone up and that everything was looking good with our pregnancy. But instead, I got a voicemail telling me that I was in the process of miscarrying our baby that we'd waited for so long. And when I came home to tell my husband that, the world shattered that night.
And for me, the hardest thing was, through this whole process, I'm the husband, I'm the man, I'm the, of the family, I'm the man of the family. And so therefore, I need to carry all this. And so, through all the inseminations, through trying for adoption and everything, I'm the one that has to be uplifting, positive, and at that point, it just kind of hit a wall and I lost it. We both lost it. That moment in the kitchen when Jessica came home and told me that, she'd miscarried and that we weren't going to have our little blessing. For me, it just all hit right then and there. I lost everything. I lost my faith. I lost my purpose. I lost why I was here. I'm just like, why, God? Why is this happening to me? I mean, I had dreams and aspirations of having a big family. And I have one beautiful, healthy daughter that I thank him for, but that was it. And here, it had been so many years, trials and trying everything and trying to be positive and uplifting for my wife. And it just was a big, massive slap in the face. I didn't know what to do, and I lost it. It's probably the hardest I've ever cried in my life. So that moment, I just was done. The next hardest day was probably that Sunday at church, trying to go and get in the spirit and be uplifting and positive, and I didn't even want to be there. And I know I had to be there as the man of the house, and as the spiritual leader, I needed to be there, but that's the last place I wanted to be, because I was so mad at God and didn't understand why this was happening to me and in my life. But for my wife and for my daughter, I knew I needed to be there.
So after we got the call that I was miscarrying, I think that was probably the longest drive I had coming home, because I knew Jason was going to be at home and probably expecting good news. And I remembered bawling all the way home. And when I got home and he asked me what was wrong, and I told him that the doctor had called and left me a voicemail on my phone to tell me that I was losing the baby, It was the hardest thing ever to have to stand there and talk about. We stood there in our kitchen, and I think we were both just numb and in shock and couldn't believe that we were going through this again. I can remember being angry at God and not understanding why we were going through this, and even doubted my faith. I can remember sitting in the back of church services and wondering why God was such a loving God but putting me through this. I didn't know if I'd been a bad mother and was being punished, or if I was being punished for something that I'd done earlier in my life. And my faith really got tested then, and it was probably the roughest, lowest point of life. And I can remember telling Jason that I would understand if he wanted to leave me because I couldn't provide him with any more children. And it was just a really low time.
And after hitting that emotional brick wall, we just kind of went through routine, and just kind of, for me, we were numb. I was numb for about 2 years. We just kind of moved on and just accepted the fact that we were never going to have another kid, and just kind of started feeling a little bit of peace about it.
Yeah, I can remember Tim Enlow coming to church, and at the end of one of his services, he called everybody to come down to the altar and just release things that were weighing them down. And I went forward that night because I wanted rid of all that pain that I had been having. And I feel like that's when God really, truly lifted that off of me to where I wasn't hurting anymore and blaming myself for trying to figure out why all this was happening. I finally was coming to peace with things and was ready to just move on and enjoy our life with our beautiful daughter that we already had, and just be happy and content with that.
For me, it was portraying Jesus in the first Easter play. It was such a release, and it was revealing to me on how selfish I was. Here, Christ gave his life, and here I was portraying Christ and everything, and it just gave me such peace to move on and to accept the facts that it's okay to move on. And Reagan is a beautiful, healthy girl, and she's gonna be my only one, and I was okay with that.
And then at the beginning of a service in January 2016, Nick was talking about how we needed to tell God what we were expecting that year and what we wanted to see happen in our lives, in the church, in the community. And I can remember standing there because even though I had this peace of being fine with only having one child, I still had a yearning in my heart to have another child.
Yeah.
But I just fought with it and didn't go forward and pray with anyone that day. And finally I see Robin Coons at the end of the altar, and she walked back to me at my seat and told me that all God wanted was to hear me say what I wanted. And I told her that I just wanted to have another child. I was tired of people asking me why I only had one child and having to go through the whole process of why I only had one. And Robin told me, Jessica, you have 2 children. You just have one here on earth. And I'd never really thought of that pregnancy that we'd lost, since it was just 2 short days of that being my child, but it really was. And she told me, and Jessica, God told me to come tell you that this year we're going to be celebrating a pregnancy because in 2016, he's going to give that to you. And you're going to have that positive test. And so she prayed with me that day, back at my seat, prayed over the child that didn't even exist at that point, and really stepped out in faith. And I can remember just that hope being restored in me that this could really happen. But it was really hard to hear her say that because people had told us this would happen before.
Several times.
And when it didn't, we would just get knocked down again. But I don't know, something was different that time, and I believed it. And I just had this faith restored that this really was going to happen.
And of course, she came home and told me that, and I did not receive it. But little did I know, 6 months later, on Father's Day weekend, I would get up from sleeping and go and find a little gift that says Happy Early Father's Day, and it was a positive pregnancy. And talk about totally changing your whole world, your whole life around. And, you know, it was just one of the greatest days ever.
So I really believe that finding out Father's Day weekend was all part of God's timing, since Jason was still having some doubts. And I think that that was all God, and that happening when it did. So we were really scared still whenever we found out we were pregnant, because we were afraid that we were going to have to go through another loss. So we told a few people that were close to us, but really kind of kept the news to ourselves for about 12 weeks. But I think whenever we finally went to our 8-week appointment and got to see and hear the baby's heartbeat for the first time, that we really just had a peace and knew from there that everything was going to be okay.
It was all in God's will, and you know, we were just so truly thankful. And it was a very long and hard process through it all, but in the end, I mean, God has built our faith even stronger now than what it was. And so we just give him all the glory and honor.
And I think everything that we learned through this whole 10-year process was that God's timing may not be our timing, but we got to trust in him anyways and
build our faith up. Matthew 21:22 says, if you pray and ask for it, you will receive it. And we received it.
So on February 17th, 2017, we were blessed with our beautiful daughter that we had waited forever for, Amari Ryan. And Amari means miracle or promised by God. And she definitely lives up to that. It was something that we had prayed for many years and had waited a long time for. And we had been told that it was going to be promised to us, and it was just waiting on God's perfect timing for that to be fulfilled.
Yes, and she is definitely a true blessing in our lives, a true blessing for Reagan to witness and to go through this whole experience with us. And we couldn't be more thrilled